morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to our weekly review of how religion impacts humanity. This week's headlines. Mufti Abu Layth's house was attacked in Birmingham by a Muslim gang. A police officer is filmed ignoring Muslim gang death threats. Evil men gang rape a Christian girl in Faisalabad, Pakistan. Pakistani celebrities demand justice for Sunita Masih. Parents allegedly drowned a possessed daughter during exorcism in Indonesia. The Batley grammar school teacher who showed the Mohammed cartoon is allowed back to school, but the cartoon isn't. And the ceasefire is holding in Israel. Now, regular viewers may remember last week we showed a clip of a convoy of Muslim protesters driving through a Jewish part of London shouting abuse. Moderate Mufti Abu Layth expressed his disapproval of their behaviour. So what happened? They attacked his house in Birmingham. See this video by Harris Sultan.
There is no doubt that Palestinians are suffering. There is no doubt that Israel's disproportionate response in which Palestinian women and children are killed is horrible, and no sane person would not condemn it. That's just an absolute fact, and the UN recognizes it, and the whole world community recognizes that. I'm not going to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in detail. As I said, I've already spoken about it, and you can check out the video later on my channel. But what we're going to discuss here is this mentality that if you don't agree with us, or if you don't chant the slogans that we approve of, you're not safe. We can get in your house, we can terrorize your family, and we can even hurt you. Who knows what they would have done if Mufti Abu Layth was at home. So have a look at this video so you understand what's actually happening.
Dirty dog Abu Layth who disrespect our brothers and sisters of Palestine. Yeah.
This is Mufti Abu Layth's house, and they're throwing rocks through the windows, calling him out, cursing him. They get in the house. You can imagine what would be going through the minds of Mufti Abu Layth's wife and his young daughter. They're going up the stairs. They have no fear. They have no shame. They have no respect by the Islamic standards as well. The respect of and the sanctity of the house, and barging in someone's house where there could be women and children there. Now, this is atrocious. This is condemnable in the highest of the degree. Whether you agree with Mufti Abu Layth or you don't agree with him, this is something that just cannot be tolerated. Now, what was Mufti Abu Layth's stance on Palestine? Now, as I said, there's this video that you can go and watch it yourself, but I will summarize it for you. Mufti Abu Layth genuinely believes that Palestinians got the wrong end of the stick in the 1947 UN's partition plan, and then later on, after all the wars and the receding territorial lines of Palestine, which is not an independent state now, and is, including Gaza, it is occupied by Israel. Gaza is supposedly uninterfered, but Gaza gets the supplies through Israel, and West Bank is under Israeli occupation. So Mufti Abu Layth recognizes that, and he doesn't approve of it, and he condemns it. What he did say, that Israel is here to stay. Now, he was being pragmatic, and he was sharing his thoughts on what could be a reasonable outcome. He said you should protest, you should speak up, but you should not guilt trip other Muslims in joining your cause or joining your way of thinking or what you think is the best solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He also invoked Albani's fatwa, where Albani suggested that you should migrate, you should emigrate in case of infidel oppression, if you view that as infidel oppression. But he said that is highly unlikely, but that is something that is a possibility. This is the only part where I kind of disagree with him. I think that there should not be a two-state solution, although that is probably the most pragmatic one at this point. But the longer-lasting solution, in my opinion, is that Gaza, West Bank and Israel should all become one secular country, which is probably more acceptable to Israelis, but it won't be acceptable to the Palestinians because they just wouldn't accept living under Jewish majority. That's just the way how Islam has trained its mindless followers. Mufti Abu Layth also condemned this behavior of Palestinians in foreign countries, especially in Birmingham, his own home city. He talked about this protest where streets were blocked and people who had nothing to do with Israeli-Palestinian conflict had to suffer. He spoke about some ambulances which were carrying children, but they couldn't get to the hospital because of the blockades. And here is a glimpse that has gone viral from those protests. As you can see, this is obviously atrocious. This is atrocious by anyone who thinks that by using this kind of language, by demonstrating this kind of behavior, the world will be like, oh, okay, we understand your problem and we sympathize with you. No, that's not how human psyche works. Mufti Abu Layth didn't obviously comment on this particular video, but he just said that the way you're acting, the way you're behaving, that is not good for the Palestinian cause. And that's a sensible statement to make.
The Metropolitan Police has launched an internal investigation after a shocking video emerged appearing to show at least one of its officers ignoring death threats against Jews. Footage emerged of a mob walking through the streets of Golders Green in London on Sunday, yelling, "We'll find some Jews. We want the Zionists. We want their blood." In a clip posted by Subject Access on YouTube, at least one police officer can be seen walking alongside the group, acting as a bystander while these death threats are made. A police spokesman said, "The Met are aware of this footage and officers from the Met's Public Order Crime Team are making inquiries. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Met by dialing 101 or by tweeting @MEtCC on Twitter." Police were forced to separate pro-Israeli rally attendees and Palestine campaigners on Sunday after counter-demonstrators attempted to breach security and confront them. In a separate incident, a demonstrator is filmed walking through central London with torn Israeli flags on his shoes, saying, "This is the Nike anti-Jewish edition." The Met confirmed it is aware of the anti-Semitic comments made at the protest, adding that 7 were arrested, including for a racially aggravated public order offence. Following Saturday's protests and arrests, Chief Superintendent Andy Walker said, "We reacted quickly to the decision by a small group to break away from the main protest, and where offences were identified, arrests were made." See this video.
That was an act of provocation. So what we're saying now, and I make it very clear so everyone understands, if those dogs come close to us again, we will see it as an act of aggression and we will kill those dogs, we will put them down.
The Jabba Dawa then led the crowd to Speaker's Corner, and as the mob marched through London streets, screaming, "We'll find some Jews, we want their blood," the police did nothing. Let that sink in. They're calling for our literal blood, and the police are just strolling alongside them.
We'll find some Jews there! Right down it, mark the blood! This is the Layth anti-Jewish edition.
A couple of hours later, we were violently assaulted leaving a kosher restaurant in an anti-Semitic attack. I hate to say this, but I'm not sure there's a future for Jews in this country. We're being attacked on the streets by extremists, and the police do nothing. After a pro-Palestinian convoy drove through a Jewish neighborhood threatening to rape Jewish women and children, this odious pair drove to that same neighborhood, Golders Green, broadcasting inflammatory messages on the side of a lorry. In summary, the UK doesn't feel like a safe place to Jews anymore.
According to reports on social media, a group of men allegedly kidnapped and raped a 14-year-old Christian girl in Faisalabad. Christians in Pakistan, shown here in green, have a history of continuous discrimination against them and treatment as second-class citizens. A group of Muslim men abducted the girl for not reciting the Kalima. The abductors later allegedly sexually assaulted the minor and shaved her head for refusing to convert to Islam. Celebrities in Pakistan have taken to social media to voice their condemnation of the brutal gang rape and torture. Demands for justice for the girl expressed outrage at the incident and questioned why people seem to be slipping deeper and deeper into moral depravity. Actor Amina Khan said about the case, "How rude, ignorant, and heartless are these racist people." Appalled, speechless, tweeted Faisal Qurashi. Assailants of such crimes should be granted the highest form of punishment so that they can be an example for all those who even think of committing such atrocious crimes. Christians of Pakistan, like other religious minorities in the country, have been the target of escalating attacks in recent years. Yahoo News, Australia, reports that Indonesian parents have been arrested for allegedly drowning their 7-year-old daughter in an exorcism ritual because they believed she was possessed by an ape-like demon. The incident took place in the village of Bajen in the Indonesian province of Central Java. According to Top Metro News, the aunt of the young victim inquired about her whereabouts last week during the Eid al-Fitr Muslim festival. The girl's grandfather reportedly said that the victim had not visited him in 4 months because he was told she had been ill. They decided to visit the girl at her home, where they reportedly found her decomposing remains. The girl's parents, whose names have not been disclosed, allegedly admitted to carrying out an exorcism ritual because they believed she was possessed due to her naughty behaviour, according to the news site Coconuts Jakarta. The couple's neighbours reportedly told them that their daughter was possessed by a mythical ape-like creature from Java known as Genderuwo. According to reports, the parents allegedly submerged the girl in water multiple times until she died. They then allegedly put the girl's body on a bed, and the neighbours said that she should wake up one day. After finding the victim's rotting remains, the aunt and grandfather told the village chief, who then contacted the authorities. The local police have arrested the 4 people accused of taking part in the exorcism, while the victim's body has been sent for an autopsy. Police spokesperson Benny Setyawadi said they suspected one of the neighbours is a village shaman. The spokesperson said the body was badly decomposed and only skin and bones remained. The Batley teacher suspension has been lifted. But the Mohammed cartoon should not be used again, says the school. The trust says it is not necessary to use pictures of the Prophet Muhammad in RS lessons or any other lessons out of respect for the community. Stephen Evans, Chief Executive of the National Secular Society UK, said he welcomes the decision to lift the teacher's suspension, but the Trust's stated commitment to ensuring that claiming offence is a route to censorship sets a very poor precedent. The outcome of this local investigation will affect teachers' abilities to do their jobs across the country, so the government should face questions over its failure to show leadership when fundamental principles are at stake. Teachers must be able to explore challenging issues in the classroom and shouldn't face a religious veto on which resources they can use. The ceasefire is holding in Israel. This analysis of the way forward from a South African radio show.
All right, let's focus on international matters now. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas seems to be holding after the latest conflict claimed lives on both sides. Israeli politicians and military commanders say their airstrikes did serious damage to what they're calling the infrastructure of terror, from buildings to underground installations. But Hamas leaders and fighters were targeted and killed. But they're also saying they see themselves as a winner. They say it has demonstrated to Palestinians that Hamas is prepared to fight for their rights in Jerusalem and take on the might of Israel. But the ceasefire is merely a pause in an unending conflict. We are joined now by Daniel Pomerantz, who's the CEO of Honest Reporting and is based in Israel. Daniel, welcome to our program and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Even as this ceasefire seems to be holding for now, a permanent resolution to this conflict, some might say, seems as remote as ever.
Well, you know, the founding charter of the Hamas organization says that its reason for existence is to destroy the state of Israel and murder Jews globally. It actually says that in the document. It's like their constitution or their Declaration of Independence. And it would actually be a significant source of shame if they were to stop at anything less than that. So the only way that this resolves both for the Jewish people and the Arab people and the Palestinian people is if Hamas either ends up being completely reformed as an organization or taken out of power. A lot of people don't realize that the legitimate government of the Palestinian people is the Palestinian Authority. Hamas is actually a rival of the Palestinian Authority and controls the Palestinian people within the area of Gaza. So they're really not seen as legitimate even among the Palestinian people and certainly not in the wider world.
Is the two-state plan still viable?
I believe so. It's, you just need to have, you know, here on the ground, there are so many people who really believe in coexistence, and we see it every day. We see it in our friends and our neighbors and our relationships, but those don't make headlines because it's not exciting news to say, hey, today in Israel, a couple of people got along. You're never going to hear that. But I think it represents most people. I think it represents most desires. And it may be naively optimistic of me, but I think it's going to win in the end because it's the only thing that can.
We've seen tensions within Israel in the last conflict between citizens of Arab and Jewish descent in Israel. Some would say there's been a steady rise in the influence of Israeli political factions that want an expansion over Jerusalem, the annexation of various parts of the West Bank. And of course, as more Palestinian territory is taken, one would argue the two-state solution seems less viable.
It's actually a misunderstanding of both history and maps. There are, there's an expression that in Israel you get 10 Israelis, you're going to get 12 opinions, and there are different groups that want different things. But the portion of the West Bank that was offered to the Palestinian government in the last several offers, and there have been at least 3 or 4 in the last 10 years, have ranged around 97% of the West Bank. Israel has completely left Gaza and is present in 0% of Gaza. In terms of what different political groups desire, of course, there's a range. In terms of what happens on the ground, the Palestinian government controls as much territory as it has over at any point in the last 10 to 20 years. And to create an independent, viable Palestinian state, it would still take the negotiations would still take the same form that they had at any point in the past.
But with the blockades continuing, with the restrictions, with no control of their airspace and borders, right down to what Palestinians may or may not consume. I mean, here in South Africa, we know what apartheid looks like. We know a Bantustan when we see one.
Yeah, I know South Africans understand apartheid better than anyone and understand the suffering of it and the deep loss of it. And I certainly wouldn't presume to speak about that. What I can speak to is what I see here in Israel. Within Israel, Palestinians sit as justices of the Supreme Court, as members of parliament, of the Knesset. One of the largest, strongest political parties right now is an Arab party. Palestinians are doctors and lawyers and actors and movie stars and fighter pilots and police officers and everything that Israelis do. So without presuming to speak myself about what apartheid is or isn't, I would just say that perhaps all South Africans with this deep and painful memory might think back and ask oneself, is what I'm describing something that sounds to you like what apartheid was? Perhaps you might find the answer is surprising.
Well, no less than Human Rights Watch has condemned the acts of the Israeli government, the arbitrary arrests and illegal imprisonment of one racial group, the population being divided at times along racial lines, the creation of urban ghettos for one group, the expropriation of property, forced removals. Those are things we are familiar with.
Well, Human Rights Watch actually changed the definition of apartheid in order to try and make it apply to Israel. In fact, they specifically said in their document, we are abandoning the definition of apartheid that is understood in South Africa and putting together a new one of our own. And they took several different documents from different places and put together this new definition. And they also took their data from groups that are openly and proudly agenda-driven groups, but not groups that are working toward bringing unbiased information. And so the report really was not a report that can be taken in a reliable way. But I think the important thing to realize is that, there are a lot of Palestinians who understand what I'm saying and say it as well. And just last week, Palestinian-Israeli journalist Khaled Abu Toameh wrote in the Jerusalem Post that 43 Palestinians in Gaza had been arrested by Hamas for the crime of, and I quote, spreading rumors. And that's what happens when people try to speak out, even to an NGO like Human Rights Watch. Now, I don't know what's going to happen to those 43 Palestinians, but in the past, when people are arrested for things like that, Hamas usually either blindfolds them and throws them off the top of a building or chains them to a motorcycle and drags them to their death through the streets of Gaza. My question is, who's speaking up for those Palestinians? Because those are the people who both need our help and deserve our help. Those are the people who are going to work together with Jews and Israelis to bring about a better future for all of us. And those are the people who are suffering under an organization that is not recognized even by the Palestinian government as a legitimate governing body.
Daniel Pomerantz, the CEO of Honest Reporting based in Jerusalem.
Stay tuned on this channel for the live show Free Thought Hour with street epistemologist Tyrone Wells from Knoxville, starting in about 10 minutes. We will be back with our weekly news review on all our platforms at the same time next week. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, set the notifications, etc. Thank you for watching.